Hi everybody. So this month we are focusing on tone. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. I've started doing these kind of very tonal sketches, which I'm loving. They're a little bit of a breakthrough for me. And yeah, I just thought it'd be a nice thing to explore together. So thinking about the theme of tone has made me realise what a big part tone has been in my work for a very long time. And I often say I'm not a line work person. I love line work that other people do. I love beautiful line work. I'm just not very good at doing it myself. And I don't think in lines, I think in tone. So when I see something and then it kind of gets filtered through my brain and then comes out on the paper, I'm not looking for lines, I'm looking for different tones. And that's just how I think and how I create sketches. I did a poll on Instagram recently to ask if other people also sketched using tone, thought in tone, or whether they sketched in line. And it was something like 80% of people were line work people and 20% were tone. So I think it can be really interesting to approach things in a different way. So I'm going to assume the majority of people will probably do a sketch using line work. And yeah, exploring a different way of working can be really useful kind of for just seeing things from a different perspective. It can really help you have breakthroughs and deal with things that had been challenging. So yeah, so I think this is going to be really fun. Just to say, I'm going to use the term tone, but because that's what I've always used here in the UK. We say tone, light tones, dark tones, tonal variety, tonal contrast, a tonal image rather than value. I feel like that's more of an American term, but I hear a lot of people on the internet talking about the values in an image or focusing on value. But as far as I'm aware, the two words mean the same thing. Value and tone are the same thing, but I'm going to say tone because it's what I'm used to, and I also think it's a little bit clearer. And I'm a big fan of art language that is easy to understand. So I just wanted to give you a little demonstration here on Procreate of the difference for me between a line sketch and a tone sketch, and how that kind of affects what I look for and how I'm sketching. So if I was sketching this with line, maybe I'd put kind of like the horizon line in, and then tree trunk, don't know, trying to get the shape of the tree, and there's kind of some branches coming through. Maybe I'll do try and capture some of the leaves with little wiggly things. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I'm not a line work person. That's a pretty terrible drawing. But yeah, that's how maybe I would look at it from a line point of view, and then you could start putting in some of the other bushes. There's another tree behind here. But yeah, not great. But that would be approaching it line first, and then approaching it tone first would really change the way I looked at this image. So I think sometimes with line, for me personally, if I'm outlining something, I'm thinking this is a tree, this is a tree trunk, this is a branch, and then you kind of fall into automatic drawing because your brain thinks, well, I know what a tree looks like, I know what a branch looks like. Whereas if you're looking for tone, you're looking for something different. You're not thinking, where are all the branches, where are all the leaves? You're thinking, where are all the dark tones? And that's just a kind of a different thing. So if I was sketching tonally, maybe I'll start sketching the trunk, but then also I could start sketching some of the darker tones as well. And as I'm going along, I'm kind of checking what's there and how my sketch is looking. For me, my top tip for sketching tone is to squint or close one eye. It really helps you kind of spot the tones, really simplifies it. And you can then kind of notice things like the shadow underneath, which is kind of such a big
part of it. It kind of goes right off the edge of the page. The tree kind of coming down like this, and then, you know, maybe some little bits of light. And then putting in some more kind of mid-tones. Kind of horizon behind, maybe some other trees. The tree that's kind of behind, putting that in, and then looking where the shadow kind of is on that, how it relates to this tree, where the dark bits are. So you can see by working tonally, it's completely changed the way I kind of move my eyes around the image, what I'm looking for, the way I approach it, and the way that I'm now seeing this tree in relationship to everything else around it. So it's just a really different approach, and neither one is right or wrong. I just personally feel more comfortable and more confident using a more tonal approach. That's just me. But you can see how it kind of changes your focus, changes the way you look at an image. You know, if I wanted to have this bench, I could use some negative space. So I could kind of have the bench kind of coming out like that, and then put in the bits of the bench kind of with the dark bits behind, rather than outlining every individual slat. I can just put the shadows in behind them, and then we're starting to understand that that's a bench. And then maybe we've got some lighter tones. And looking maybe for the tones on this bench is gonna, a bit of a shadow under the bench, help me kind of understand how to draw it more in terms of perspective, potentially. And then there's kind of shadow on this side. I mean, obviously that's not finished, but you can kind of start to get a sense. And I think as an image, this has got a bit more depth and a bit more perspective, and it's giving me more information. So then if I was going to go and do a sketch, do a painting at home, this tonal sketch has given me a little bit more information. So yeah, that's for me the difference. We're doing a tonal sketch, that I'm looking for areas of light and dark and mid-tones, rather than looking for objects, thinking that's a tree, that's a bush, that's separate. You know, I'm kind of almost seeing the tree and the leaves and the trunk and the shadow all as one, because they're all in the same dark tone. And yeah, it's just helping me see everything in relationship to each other. And I personally think that's really important, and I think that's a really good way to get better at drawing. People often say, how do I get better at the actual drawing part, not the painting part, but the drawing part? And I think seeing everything in relationship to each other is really important, because then if something's wildly out of proportion, you're going to notice, because of how it reacts with things around it, and really drawing things in context and kind of taking in the whole scene, the whole composition. So for me personally, tone helps me do that, because it disrupts that kind of process of me thinking, well, I'm drawing a tree, I know what a tree looks like. Yeah, so for that reason, I think it's a really great tool to have in your artist's kind of tool belt, especially if you're faced with a scene where you think, I don't know how to approach this, you know, whether it's a beautiful landscape or a busy scene, bunch of flowers, whatever it is, and you think, this is a bit complicated, I don't know where to start, I can't quite get my head around it. Start looking for the tones first and put some of those in and block in the tones, and that can kind of get you going. Yes, I was thinking about this subject, and it made me realise how I've always been all about tone.
rather than line work. So this is a very recent sketchbook, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But looking back at some of my older sketchbooks, so these are sketchbooks from when I was in university, I think in my second and third year, so I would have been about 20, so quite a long time ago. We're talking, 14 years ago. But looking at my sketches then, and I was working in pencil because obviously that's not a very good example, this one. I very much believed that a sketchbook should be a place for pencil sketches, so I was working exclusively in pencil in my sketchbooks, but I was really interested in capturing tone. So this was sketched on location in Paris, and I was really interested in the different tones of the roofs, the chimneys, and then the Eiffel Tower kind of more faint in the background. And again, really looking at just capturing the chimneys and the different tones. Really going to the detail of capturing all the different tones, all the shadows on some pastries wrapped up in paper. And again, little tonal sketches, so the people, there's a darker bit for the umbrella, lighter bit for the body, darker bit for the legs. Capturing these antique cups. And this little sketch here, which I love, and for me, using tone just gives me so much more information. So it really gives us a sense of physicality, of where the shadows are, where the curves are, the 3D-ness of this statue, but also the feel as well, the mood. It feels very serene and contemplative. So yeah, I love that little sketch. And for me, I wouldn't have been able to capture something that had that feel in line work. But as you can see, I was working exclusively in pencil, capturing all this tone and detail, which was very laborious. And I think the fact that my line sketches didn't look good, they didn't kind of satisfy me, they didn't do what I wanted them to do, and that these tonal sketches were quite laborious and they took a while, I kind of fell out of love with the sketchbook for a bit, and then I started using paint in my sketchbook and working in colour, and I got back into sketchbooks in a big way. But yeah, this is how I used to work when I was in university. And as you can see, I'm just really looking for tone and looking for pattern as well. So this was Paris in my second year of university. I took a week off university to go and draw on location in Paris on my own, which was amazing. And I've got another one here. So this was, again, what year is this? 2010. Yeah, and just sitting at a cafe, sketching the sugar packets and the olives, but again, just looking for all those different shadows and tones in my sketches. So yeah, it's been interesting to look back and realise that I've actually always been interested in tone, and I've always seen the world in terms of tone rather than line. And that's kind of come up in my work lots throughout the years. So I actually got to work on a project which was all in black and white, so that was really fun. So that was this one, which is a book called Project 333. And yeah, I got to create these lovely tonal black and white images, which was really, really fun. And a really lovely project to work on, and just playing with shadows, pattern, negative space, that kind of thing. And there's been some projects in some of my books that really play with tone. So this one in Watercolour Life, it's an exercise on using masking fluid, but it's also an exploration of tone, because you've got this mid-tone in the background, and then we've got the darker colour, which is the hair, sunglasses, lips, centre of the flowers, and then we've got the white as well from the masking fluid. So yeah, this is a real exploration of tone using one colour. And again, this is quite a nice tonal study in Get Started with Gouache, where we've got this mid-tone in the background, and then we're going deeper with some of the flowers and lighter with some of the other flowers, and just balancing out those different tones. So yeah, it's something that's a big part of my work now, and as I said, I've been using colour in my sketchbook and doing these kind of full colour paintings basically in my sketchbook for years, which I love, but obviously they're time consuming. So I wanted to find a way of sketching that was quicker than doing a full colour painting, but gave me more information than a line sketch. So I started sketching tonally in my sketchbook, which was a bit of a breakthrough. So I played around with a few different things first, and then I did these paintings, and this was a really big stylistic breakthrough for me. So I mixed up this sepia colour, which I'm going to show you how to do in a minute. You've probably seen me do it before, but I mixed up this sepia colour with gouache and then watered it down to different proportions so that I could create all these different tones. And I did a very light sketch first, but I painted kind of freehand, focusing on the different tones and shadows, and yeah, I was really, really happy with these two sketches, and I think they've got a nice kind of emotional resonance to them. To me, they do anyway, and yeah, so that was a big stylistic breakthrough. So then I started doing more of these tone sketches, so these kind of black and white paintings using this sepia colour, which was a big breakthrough for me, and really playing with tone, so using the darker colours, thinking about what's going to be light, what's going to be dark, what's going to be mid-tone, how can I play with that, how can I use patterns. Patterns are really interesting for someone who loves tone like me, because patterns are all about tone, whether it's stripes, gingham, check, polka dot flowers. There'll be a variety of colours, but the main thing is the variety of tone. You know, if you made that pattern black and white, the chances are it would still look the same. You know, you'd still have stripes or polka dots or gingham, because it relies on the contrast of tone. So yeah, lots and lots of these, and this was this kind of stylistic move forward for me in terms of how I sketch, and then bringing that into my observational sketching as well, so sketching on location. I've got one here. I tried to do a quick sketch in colour and it was just really rubbish, and I did the same piece in tone, and I much prefer it. Particularly for me, for observational sketching, it kind of allows me to really capture something of the person or the scene very quickly. What am I looking for? So yeah, sometimes I will sketch in pencil first and do line work and then bring it into tone, and sometimes I just go straight in with tone. So this was a tonal sketch which isn't finished because a van parked here and I didn't know what was here, but this is a very tonal sketch that I did using Artgraph, which I will show you in a minute. That was the one that I showed you right at the beginning. And more sketches in my sketchbook using Artgraph. And for me, doing this tonal sketch really helps me problem solve. It helps me create quite a detailed, rich image to then work from in terms of creating artwork. And it really helps me create mood as well. For me, like putting that little dark triangle in really makes the face pop out and just creates this really feel of coziness and sleepiness to me. So for me, it's been a really useful way of sketching and kind of planning images and problem solving. And it doesn't always work, but it's just a way of kind of trying things out and exploring what's going to work within an image. So yeah, sometimes I go straight in with a tonal sketch, and then sometimes I sketch in pencil first and then bring it into tone. So I'm just going to show you an example of that, how it's become part of my process. So these are ideas for a children's book. So I sketched first little thumbnails using my favourite pencil, which is this Caran d'Ache French Grey. And I've started to put a little bit of tone in the sketches, but a lot of them are kind of largely line work. And then what I did was I scanned these in, blew them up a bit, printed them out in black and white, and then created tone sketches that were kind of a intermediary, a step in between finished artwork and sketches. And it really allowed me to problem solve and deal with issues in the image and think about how I wanted the image to look, and yeah, just get a better idea of what was working and what wasn't working. So I'll show you some of those. So these were all done with ArtGraph. So you can see there I've got initial sketch, and then to me this just gives me so much more information. It tells me where the shadows are, how the water's moving, what technique I'm going to use for the water, what the texture of the water will be. Yeah, it just really helps create a kind of a mood and something more evocative in the image. And again, we've got the sleeping giraffes here, which are really tricky to draw, but as I was sketching this with line work, I just had an image of it being on a dark background and the giraffe being lighter, so then I sketched that one there. So yeah, working with tone also allows you to really play with negative space as well, so the giraffe's kind of coming out of the dark background with the negative space, which I really like. And then I adjusted that, and again I wanted to bring a mummy giraffe in, so we've got mummy giraffe here. This was my least favourite one to sketch, these bats, and then playing around with rabbits, penguins, got little boy sleeping. So again, just very much playing around with tone in these images. And then you can probably see how, there's that first one. This is a kind of a step in between this, which kind of gives you the basic information in terms of composition and the shape of the otters, but then this gives me much more information and lets me do some problem solving, so then I feel much more confident when it comes to doing the artwork. So then what I did was I scanned that, put it into the layout, put the text in so I knew what the composition was going to be. So I printed out this and then worked with my Lightbox and then created this. So I kind of knew that I wanted the background to be darker around the otters. I knew how I wanted the water to move and flow, where it would be lighter, where it would be darker. So yeah, I'd already done a lot of problem solving with that sketch, and then that helped me kind of approach the artwork more confidently. So for me, they're a really useful planning tool and a really useful kind of step in the process of going from sketch to artwork. So just for the sake of a little bit of inspiration, I wanted to show you some tonal drawings, sketches, whatever you want to call them, that I think are really great. So this book is The Moomins and the Great Flood by Tove Jansson. It's the first Moomin book, and I absolutely love these paintings. They're so beautiful. So this is the cover, and then this is an illustration inside, which actually almost looks like a preliminary sketch for the cover, which is here, and you can see how creating this tonal sketch has really informed the cover. So there's two types of sketches in this book. There's these tonal sketches, and if I had to guess, I would say they're done with black ink on a kind of a creamy yellowy paper, because they've got this yellowy kind of background colour coming through. And then we've also got these line sketches done with a pen, and again playing with tone, but more line work. There's no grey, everything's either black or white, whereas this has lots of tones of grey, but that kind of yellow behind, and we can see some of both throughout the book. So these are all pure black, but every now and again, like this one, you get more of these kind of creamy tonal images. But I just think they're beautiful, and they're so interesting to look at and learn from. I really, really love Tove's work. So yeah, this image and the cover image, very clever with how she's used tone, obviously drawing our attention right to Moomin and Moomin Mama, because they are white and the darkest colour is directly around them, so they really stand out. a white thing on a black dark background is going to stand out, or alternatively you could have a mostly light image with a very dark area. It's just the contrast that stands out. There's no kind of hard and fast rule about the thing that stands out must be dark or the thing that stands out must be light. It can be either. It's just about creating that contrast, so your eyes are drawn to them first because you've got that really strong contrast of black and white, and then everything else is softer tones. But then secondly, your eyes are drawn here to the little creature in the dark, and again you've got that darker tone just in there and the white eyes. And then we've got these beautiful glowing flowers and this very kind of dreamy, magical, but some slightly foreboding and scary forest with all these different tones, all these different things going on. It's just really beautiful. And then we can see how that's translated here. So again, we've got these very dark tones around the Moomins, around little creature, and then we've got the flowers which are kind of glowing, and there is a glowing flower which is a character in the books, and then in this one we've got the different creatures in. We can see how it's a real study of tones, with the trees kind of lighter, dark in the background, the different tones of the flowers, the tones of the leaves. So yeah, really, really beautiful and very evocative. It's got a real mood to it, and the different tones kind of draw you into the image and move your eye around. So if I can find another one. So we've got a lovely one at the end when they've got to Moomin Valley and seen the house that Moomin Papa has made. And this one's lovely with all the little creatures on the trees. You can just see how much can be done just with black ink. This is a really lovely one. It's so atmospheric, it's so dismal and bleak, and how she's used black ink, or maybe even, I don't know this for sure, but the texture of that to me looks a lot like art graph. And art graph has been around for quite a while, so that looks like the texture of that to me. But the kind of the rain falling, the reflections in the water, the ripples of the water, the clouds, all so beautifully captured just by using these different tones of grey. And then our attention is drawn here, the silhouettes, we're drawn to the darkest colour, which is the little Moomin family here, and then things getting lighter as they get into the distance. So that's a really beautiful piece, and the different tones give us a lot of information about understanding what's happening, but also they give us a lot of information that is, you know, emotional. It tells us the atmosphere and how they're feeling and how bleak and depressing everything is. Another really lovely one here. So yeah, if you don't have this book or you haven't seen it, I do really recommend getting it. It's got really, really lovely illustrations and just a masterclass in using tone and also in using line work and using solid areas of black as well, and composition. Just very, very, very beautiful. So I'm going to show you some of my favourite materials for working tonally. So you can use almost anything. The only thing that I think is a bit tricky is pens, which is probably why I've never really used pens. Pens are better for line work, but almost anything else you'll be able to use tonally. So let me just grab some paper. Okay, so first up, going back to very, very basics, what I was doing 14 years ago would be just using pencil, and you want a nice soft pencil, so something like a 2B at least. And with a pencil you can kind of sketch very lightly, a bit more heavily, very heavily. And then with the sketches that I did, I was building up tone with lots of little marks. I was kind of doing, I do a bit of that and a bit of that. So I was kind of doing marks like that. And at the time I was doing a lot of printmaking at university, which I think had a big influence because printmaking is all about tone. So in etching I was looking at how I could build up areas of tone using these kind of little scribbly marks like that. And this pencil, I haven't used it for ages because I don't really use graphite pencils very much anymore, but it's a lovely pencil and it's the Palomino Blackwing. So we have pencil. Next up, something that is very new to me but I'm loving, also graphite, is Artgraph. So I've heard people talk about it a bit and I was like, what is it? I bought some, I really love it. It is water soluble graphite, so it comes in this little tin and it's got that kind of metallic sheen to it. It is graphite, but it's water soluble and it's really, really great for working tonally. I'm using it all the time. So all of these sketches I just showed you were done with Artgraph, and it's great for tone. It creates a lovely texture. It's got a lovely flow to it. It's also not good for line work. It kind of disappears, it dries up on your brush as you're doing the line. So it kind of forces you to be a bit more tonal and blobby, I find. So just gonna start with a little bit, goes a long way. So I pick up some there. You can see the watercolour just sinks in quite quickly. See how quick the water kind of sinks in, and if I draw a line it starts kind of running out pretty quickly compared to maybe using watercolours or gouache. So it doesn't lend itself to line work particularly. It's lovely for creating areas of tone and kind of lovely smudgy blobby shapes. That's what I really love it for. And it doesn't kind of flow and spread as much as watercolours or liquid watercolours or gouache does. It does a little bit, but not that much. And it's got this really nice kind of granulation to it, which I really like. So yeah, that is Artgraph, and I do really recommend it. It's, I think, about £10 for a tin. A tin this size will probably last you years, and the nice thing is you don't need any special equipment for it. You can just use the brush that you already have. I'm just using my go-to ProArt Prolene size 4 brush. But I think there's a lot of things which I want to try, but to get started, things like pan pastels or jelly plates, you have to get all the different equipment and then you've spent about £100. Whereas the nice thing about this is it's just a one-off purchase. You just buy the Artgraph, use it with the brush you already have, use it with some water, and that's it. You don't need to buy anything else to go with it, and it lasts for absolutely ages. So I do really love this, and it's been a bit of a game changer for me in terms of sketching. And it's really nice for sketching on location because all you need to take is this tin and one brush, and that's it, you're away. You can just put a little bit of water in the lid from a bottle and then just use this. So that's really great. Other things for working tonally, so you can use watercolours or gouache. So I've just got some black gouache here. Nice thing about gouache is you get a really big range tonally because you can use it dry straight out of the tube. So then you can get loads of texture, which I really like. And then you can get very full coverage. A bit more watery. So you get lots of different tones. That's black gouache, and then we've got black watercolours, and that was just Winsor & Newton ivory black. And then black watercolours, not quite as solid as that one, but then you get lots of lovely tones. Another thing that I used to use for tonal paintings, which I haven't used in a long time, is Winsor & Newton ink. So black ink, this is the black Indian ink, which is a bit of a classic. I used to use this a lot for brush lettering. Yeah, I don't use this a lot now because it kind of dries. I think it's got like a shellac finish, which has got a slight shine to it, but you've got a very kind of pure, deep black there. It's interesting, it's a slightly different black. I feel like this is a colder, cooler black and this is a warmer black. But it dilutes really nicely, so you can get a really nice range of tones with it. And it'll kind of blend and flow a bit like watercolours. So that's another nice option. And then the other thing is, when you're working tonally, you don't have to be working with black and white or grey. So I mentioned my sepia mix earlier, so I'm just going to show you that. I'll just bring this into shot a bit. So you've probably seen me do this before, but if you haven't, the colours that I'm going to use are, just finding everything, Permanent Yellow Deep, Ultramarine and Flame Red. So these all have kind of warm undertones, so the ultramarine's got red undertones, as does the Permanent Yellow Deep, and the Flame Red is a orangey yellowy red. If you were using watercolours, you could use cadmium yellow and cadmium red. And I kind of do equal amount of each. And I love this mix because it gives you a really beautiful sepia that the colours kind of separate out when you add more water, which creates a really pretty effect. And then just mixing them all together. I've put too much yellow on, so I'm not mixing in all the yellow. Just see, might need a bit more blue. Let's have a look. If you want this more of a kind of a grey, you want to put slightly more blue in than the other colours, and that'll give you more of a grey colour. So yeah, that's kind of as is, and then I can add a little bit of water to dilute it. And I think if you showed somebody this and said, one of these is black out of a tube and one has been mixed out of the 3 primary colours, I don't think you necessarily would even know which was which, because it's a really nice kind of cold grey. And the colours will probably settle a little bit once it dries. The colours will granulate a little bit and you'll see some of the blue pooling. And then this is more of the sepia colour, so a bit less of the blue, a little bit warmer. So yeah, we've got sepia with the mix out of the 3 primary colours, so a chromatic grey. But the other thing is, when you're working tonally, it doesn't have to be black and white, you can just use a colour. The only colour I wouldn't use is yellow, because you just don't have enough tonal range. Yellow on its own isn't really dark enough, but anything else that's a dark, deep, strong colour can be used tonally. So I've got some liquid watercolours here. So that's kind of straight out the bottle, and then adding more water as I go along. And I've used that before, so I've got a sketch over here. So a tonal sketch there of Father Christmas, which was done just freehand, so no pencil sketch underneath, just freehand using that liquid watercolour, and that colour is called Persimmon. Or something like ultramarine would be a really nice one. Any kind of deep blue would be great for something like this. Or like an indigo. So you'll have the most range if you've got something that's quite dark to start off with, and then you can gradually go lighter and lighter. And you can see these drying now. You can see what I mean about all the blue separating out and pooling, which I really love. So we've got different materials that can be used to create tone. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you a minute to go and grab your materials. I would suggest going for a wet material, so that could be a tube of black gouache, watercolours, ink. You could do the sepia mix, art graph if you have it, whatever you like, just something wet and dark basically. And then we're going to do a few exercises together. Right, so hopefully everybody's grabbed some materials, and your sketchbook or just a sheet of paper is fine. Also, I just thought I'd show you these again because they are completely dry now, and you can see how much the colour has separated out in these, which I just love. It is my favourite thing. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do some warm-up exercises, so exploring different mark making techniques, different ways of kind of creating tone with whatever wet material you've chosen, and then we're going to do a little exercise. And the exercise is straight from my new book, so we're going to do this exercise from Keeping a Creative Sketchbook. So this lady has got lots of different tones. This was originally a painting in my sketchbook, and then I adapted it to turn it into a project for my book. So different tones, different textures, different patterns. So we're going to have a go painting that, but we're going to start with doing some of this, some warm-ups. So you can use whatever you like, ink, watercolours, gouache, whatever you have. I'm going to use gouache because I've already got it on my palette. And the nice thing when you're doing this is you're exploring the medium, but also it's nice to kind of put together a palette of kind of useful marks that you can use for different things. So I'll kind of show you what I mean as I go along. So I'm just going to start doing some broad stripes, so with the brush on its side. Just pooling some colour, kind of letting those touch and flow a little bit. And then I'm going to do some more broad stripes, but I'm just going to leave them. I'm going to paint some more stripes afterwards when they're dry. So I'm just going to leave that for now. And just thinking about maybe creating tonal contrast by using wet on wet. I love that. That's just so so satisfying to watch. Thinking about different kind of brush strokes you can create, so maybe little dabbing brush strokes like that, and then they can start to join up in some areas. I use little brush strokes like that for lots of different things, for filling in areas. And then maybe bigger brush strokes, so thinking about that the effect I created with the water with the otters, so maybe some bigger brush strokes and having kind of some tonal variation and having this kind of soft movement of the brush, because I'm kind of playing around with that. I'm going to paint some little flowers using tone, so we've got a lighter colour for the petals, and each petal is just one brush stroke, and I'm just varying the pressure and the angle, and then going in with a darker colour in the centre like that. you can start to create kind of a bit of a pattern with the light petals, the dark centres. You could even think about maybe putting leaves in a mid-tone or something like that. And just thinking about creating a library of techniques in mark making that could be useful. So maybe thinking about kind of capturing something like long grass, so maybe I'd use kind of a dry brush like that, and thinking maybe it's darker at the bottom and then lighter at the top. Maybe that would work. By the way, it's raining here because it's England, and it's the summer times, of course it's raining, so I don't know if you can hear that, the rain on the roof of my studio, but hopefully it's a nice sound. I love the sound of the rain. Or maybe thinking about creating long grass, kind of more like that, kind of a pointy shape, and then putting some deeper tones at the bottom that's more in shadows, just kind of playing around, thinking what things you might like to paint and then playing around with different techniques for creating them. So thinking maybe if I'm painting a beach, I'd have some pebbles that are different tones, playing around with that, putting shadows in where they're connecting, where they're not connecting. You could do a little pebble pattern like that. That's quite nice. Or often I paint leaves kind of very loosely like that, so denser areas in the middle and then more kind of individual leaves at the edge, but not making them leaf shape, just kind of more capturing them as little objects reflecting or blocking the light rather than trying to make them all leaf shape. This one's dry now, so I'm going to go back the other way and make this a very simple gingham. So you can see where these are overlapping, it's darker in the middle. So we've got loads of different techniques there, just using our single material and just playing with tone. So we're going to do this little piece as an exercise. So you're going to want to sketch first, and I find myself kind of wanting to turn the paper around this way. I've just got to remember to make sure what I'm doing is in shot. So yeah, I'm just going to look at this and sketch so that it's kind of roughly. So this piece was inspired by, I think I saw a photo of somebody in like a checked coat, and it was this really boxy check coat, and yeah, I just thought that was really cool, and then kind of inspired the piece from there. So I've got fluffy scarf. You can see how like the dark hair is going to be framing her face. And then hat. Pom-pom. The coat is quite boxy and just really comes straight down. And then she's got a shoulder bag hanging off her shoulder, like that. And then legs. You can tell this is based on a painting from a few years ago because nobody wears skinny jeans anymore. Unfortunately, I still love skinny jeans and a boot personally, but I'm told they're not cool anymore. Okay, I think that looks about right. I'll include the image on the post, so if you don't have my book, you can see the image nice and clearly so that you can do your own sketch. Okay, so when I'm approaching an image tonally, the first thing is I look for shadows. So in an image like this, I'm going to put some shadow in behind the arm. So very basic rule of using tonal variation is when something's lighter, it comes towards you, and when something's darker, it goes into the distance. So if we have one thing that is light, that is white, and then there's dark around it, we feel like the light thing is coming towards us, we feel like the dark thing is receding. And you can see I've used that in some of my sketches. So in this one, for example, it's dark behind the child's head, which then gives a sense of shadow, and then brings the head and the face kind of more into relief coming towards us. So we're going to have shadow kind of behind the arm. So a bit of shadow here, and I always paint these nice loose shadows first and then go in over the top. It's always good to do your shadows nice and light. You can always make them darker. It's hard to make shadows lighter. So I've obviously got some lines here for a sketch, but I'm just going to paint over the lines because they're not going to be the focus. The tone's really going to be the focus. Oh, and I've just sketched using my French grey pencil, but you can sketch using anything you like. So just kind of putting the shadow in, and you can see already how that shadow is kind of sculpting the shape, so you feel that the arm is kind of coming towards you. You've got the shadow around the arm, and then thinking, you know, if her hand is in that pocket, maybe there'd be a bit of shadow on the pocket around there because the light source is here and her hand is in the pocket. So kind of thinking about that, and then thinking about having slightly darker colour, so more of a mid-tone for her legs. So doing kind of a nice neat line. I'm not going to outline the coat, so I'm just going to work up to that line and do one leg and then the other. The one in the background slightly smaller because it's kind of slightly further away from us, and then putting in a bit more kind of tone on those just for adding some depth. Maybe you'd have a bit more shadow at the top, then maybe there's a bit of a shadow from the coat. And then I'm going to paint her hat, so again that's a kind of a fairly light grey. I'm going to layer some other stuff on top. So painting the hat with the light grey and the pom-pom, I can layer some stuff on top of that. And while I've got this light grey on my brush, I think I'll do her cheeks in a light grey as well. And just thinking about timing, you know, I can't do the check on her coat yet because the shadows are still dry, but I could do her scarf. So with the scarf, I want a kind of more of a fluffy texture, and I want to use a slightly darker grey, so we've got a little bit of contrast. So just moving the brush kind of in circles. Kind of, I'm just drying the brush a bit just to try and get a bit of texture and fluffiness. You can always work into that a little bit more, put a little bit more of the depth in, a bit more fluffiness. Okay, I think that's still wet, too wet to do the bag. I'm going to do her face now. I might have to lean right in to be able to see the details on her face. If my head blocks the camera, I'm really sorry about that. So for her face, I'm going to use the darkest pure black and then also use line work. So saving pure black and saving line work for where it's needed for definition and for impact to kind of draw our focus. So I haven't sketched the face at all, I'm just going to do it really loosely and quickly. So little wiggle nose. little bridge of the nose. Right, her cheek's a bit high. I'm just testing to see with my knuckle to see if that cheek is dry enough for me to work over the top of it. I might leave it, I might do some hair. So then don't really need to draw a line around the outside of the face because the hair is going to frame the face. And then her hair is kind of tucked into her scarf and then kind of creates the shape of the face. Let's do this other eye. Yeah, I should have done the cheeks at the end rather than having them overlapping the eye, but never mind. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the paint off. I'm just going to add a bit of water to do the lips. So slightly lighter, not the pure black. So yeah, I've got the lips, and then I can kind of look at what needs shaping and definition. So tucking the kind of hair into her fluffy scarf and putting some detail on the hat. So then not pure black, but kind of a darker grey with the stripes, putting on the pom-pom, putting a bit of shadow on that side. Just looking and thinking, where does it need contrast, where does it need depth? Maybe a bit more on the fluffy scarf. And then going to do that check so that we've got some light grey lines and some darker grey. So I'm going to do some lighter grey lines first. So I'm using a size 2 brush, and I'm just going to follow the line of the coat. So just moving down, kind of following the line of the coat. Oh, somehow I picked up a tiny bit of red from something. I don't know. Ignore that. Pretend this is all black and white. I don't know. I think I picked that up from the edge of my palette, maybe accidentally. So we've got all our vertical lines and then lines going across. And then going in with a darker tone, so kind of almost black, much darker grey, and then putting in some little lines. And that's bleeding a bit because it's still wet, which I quite like that effect, but you might want to wait until it's completely dry. Yeah, I actually really like it bleeding in. I kind of wish I had more of that effect. And then some darker lines going down. I haven't left as much space for the darker lines, but never mind. Okay, kind of got the check there. And then I'm going to put her bag in. So that is darker, so it contrasts. Just put a bit of shadow in on that side, and then sort of shoulder strap, and then doing her boots, so then using that darker colour, more of the pure black. And just filling them in completely so it's more of a kind of silhouette. And then kind of looking and thinking, does it need anything else? I could at this point pop in a bit more shadow if I wanted. This is dry enough. Just felt like it could have a little bit more shadow on this side. Maybe we give her a bit of shadow that she... And then when that's completely dry, I could erase some of these pencil lines a little bit. But yeah, so you can see here there isn't an outline on the edge of her coat, but we know where the edge of her coat is because we can see where the pattern goes up to. So it's just using the negative space, the pattern and the tone to tell us something without necessarily having to outline everything. When I'm doing these tonal sketches, it's always about working out where do I need lines and where do I not need lines, where can I use something else instead of a line to give us that visual information. So yeah, there we go. That is me painting that little exercise from my book of The Girl in the Pattern Coat, which hopefully demonstrates some different ways tones can be used in a sketch. So I've got the image below so you can have a go. And my next video will be a process video. So I'll be showing you how I create a tonal sketch looking at a photo. So how I translate that photo and decide what to focus on and yeah, turn it into a tonal sketch.